When Danny Johnson and I were 16 years old, we were extremely lucky to get a 97 V6 Mustang to share. Laser red, 5-speed, good car, 39,000 miles, and back then it was a $10,000 car. And our parents were very good to us and they let us keep this car together until I found mine for half the price in Chicago. And we flew, most halfway across the country and got mine and brought it home because we were able to get it for half of what the other one was. But anyway, we had these Mustangs and we loved them. We put dual exhaust on them from a GT. They were '02 GT takeoffs, Cobra R style wheels, and we really loved these cars. We took care of them. We washed them, cleaned them. If it ever rained on them, we would wash them before we put them back in the garage for the night. These cars meant a lot to us. But during this time, the New Edge Mustangs were brand new, and we loved the New Edge Mustangs as well. And we always wanted one, but boy, they were expensive. And for a 16-year-old kid without a job, there was just no way to get a Mach 1 or a Cobra or a Bullet. They were just way out of our reach. As we got older and started going to college, the prices started to drop a little bit on the New Edge Mustangs, and Danny and I would have a lot of time together while we'd be studying for college. We'd take a break and go down to a pool table in the apartment building where I lived, and we'd play pool and we'd talk cars, and we just talk about how much we wanted a Mach 1 or a Terminator. And of course the Terminators were still really expensive and out of our reach as young college kids, but we always talked about getting a Mach 1, and we would look on the sale ads, and Danny came across a really nice looking '03 Mach 1, and it was about half the price of what the Mach 1s were going for back then because the transmission was bad. Said that third gear was missing, and we looked it over, and he got really excited about it and started thinking, wow, for that price it'd be really fun to get that car. And so we talked it over, and we dare each other to buy it. You buy it, no, you buy it, and it finally came down to the point where he said, I think I'm going to get this, because he had sold his white GT, which he got back recently, if you watch the stories on his channel. And he had to sell that white GT, but he had told his wife that if he sold the GT, then he was going to get a Mach 1 or something like that later. And so as you can tell, this story is going to get pretty interesting. Here are some pictures of the car now in his garage, and these pictures you can find on his Instagram. And this is how beautiful the car looks today. But the story behind this car was pretty wild. We started out, he decided he'd get the car, told the guy that we would come up and get it and look it over and everything, and it was about 4 hours away, 5 hours away, up in Elko, Nevada, which is a little town up in Nevada, and the car would see some snow and things up there. And these are pictures of driving up there in his G35. We decided to go together and have a fun trip. And so from what we knew about the car is that it had a blown transmission from third gear, that the car still drove, but third gear was out. And other than that, that it was in good shape. It had 90,000 miles or something like that on it. It wasn't too high yet. And that the car had been purchased new by a doctor, and then this kid who had it now had only had it for a couple of years. So we went up, and here's some cool pictures of our trip on the way. We found this Camaro for sale, and we went through these little ghost towns. And as we were driving, he would send us a couple pictures of the car. And in the pictures, of course, you're going to think that the car looks just great. We were both just so super excited to see this Mach 1 in the pictures and think that, wow, this guy's got a real Mach 1 and we're going to go see it. We hadn't seen one since the dealerships had them, and we went and looked at them new in the dealer and drooled over them. And we both didn't have Instagram yet. We didn't have any friends with these cars. There were a couple in town we'd get glimpses of here and there. But for the most part, it seems like the Mach 1s had disappeared around our area. So here's a picture he sent while we were on our way of the car jacked up in the air. He said he was changing out the mid-pipe for the stock one because the other one was really loud and he wasn't sure if we were going to like it or not. And we were excited and thought a lot about him because we hadn't really worked on cars yet. believe it or not, this is before Danny Johnson had ever swapped a transmission or anything, and this is the car that we would first start working on. But anyway, we really loved this car, and we were excited about it because it was less money than what he had sold his GT for. We couldn't believe that we were going to be able to get a Mach 1 like this. And so he sent some pictures of the interior, and you know, the seats looked pretty good here, and all in all, it looked like it was all there. So here's the picture of the first time we both saw it. We were both very excited, waiting for him to show up. We decided to meet here in the high school parking lot in Elko, and we were waiting for him to show up, and we both were super excited, and we didn't really know exactly what we were going to see, and you know. And around the corner he came, you know, ripping around with the loud exhaust. It had SLP Loudmouth 1 catback, and the stock mid-pipe still sounded really deep, really loud, compared to the V6 Mustangs we were used to, and then the stock GT he had for a little while. This thing sounded incredible. Looking back on it, this was just a major event for both of us, and it was really fun to see a Mach 1 that had lived a life away from us, and now we were getting to know the car. So we looked over the car, and it started to get dark, and we were pretty shocked to see that the front hood had rock chips like crazy. It's almost like he followed his friends down gravel roads with it. You know, some of these were like dime-sized rock chips. And, you know, the car was leaking from the differential. He told us that the clutch would pop in and out. It had some scratches on it here and there. But the worst part about it was all the hard water spots. It had hard water all over it, and he said that it had been sitting on the side of his house under the sprinklers while the transmission was broken, and so he wasn't daily driving it anymore, but it had been sitting. So we took it to this car wash and started soaping it up. We really didn't know a whole lot about clear coat and how to clean water spots and all that stuff, and we spent $20 on this wash job because it was one of those things that took your credit card and it just kept going as you went. And so we scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed, and next thing we knew, it was $20 into it, and those hard water spots were not coming off. We were still really in love with the car though, and we test drove it around Elko for a little while, and I followed them in the G35 while Bo, who was the owner there in the white shirt, and Danny Johnson drove this car all around. And following this car was so cool. It was so loud, and it sounded so good. The 4.6 liters are such good sounding engines, and the dual overhead cam sounds so good too, with the 32 valve idle, you know, the burble at idle and everything. I followed them around, and I thought to myself, gosh, I love this car. If he doesn't buy it, then I'm going to buy it. That's what I thought initially. So then we all went for a ride in it, and it rumbled around, it sounded good, and Bo, he was pretty good mechanically. You know, we looked up to him at this point. We had never really done much with the cars, and he was showing us how if you rev the engine up and let the RPM come to a certain RPM, you can slide it into gear without using the clutch. You can match the synchros and everything, and he was showing us how he drove it home that way from North Dakota, where he broke the transmission. And Bo was a cool guy, and we liked him, and he seemed like he knew a lot about the car. Bo didn't seem too worried about anything. He's really easygoing, saying, oh yeah, it's easy fix, you know. He said, you know, sometimes the clutch will pop off, the cable will come off. Just climb under there, you know, push the clutch fork forward against the diaphragm fingers and slide the clutch thing in there. He's like, it was so easy to him, but we were really scared because we had never really done anything with cars before, like to that extent. He was a real funny guy too, you know. We're driving together in it, and I said, wow, this reminds me of my friend's Bullet. The sound of it sounds, you know, reminds me of my friend's Bullet. And he was like, this is smoke a Bullet. You know, he was just real awesome, real redneck guy. And I remember him driving, and my brother said something about, does it drive straight? And he took both hands off the wheel and held them up at his shoulders, and he looked over at him, you know, and then he'd put it in gear. He'd slide it in gear with the synchros, and then he'd lift his hand up off the shifter and hold it up high above the shifter and look at Danny like, you know, see, it works, you know. And he was a cool guy. He was a little bit crazy, but he was cool. This may sound funny, but there's a Taylor Swift song called The Way I Loved You, and it's about two different guys. One's a gentleman and does everything right. The other one's crazy, and he reminds me of Bo. When I hear that song, I think of Bo as the guy who's screaming and fighting, kissing in the rain. 2 a.m. She's cursing his name. It's like he was just a wild redneck cool guy, and I respect him for that. And Danny as well. We just thought he was a pretty cool guy, and he knew his stuff with the cars. But anyway, we decided to go home and that night and go to the hotel. He was going to buy the car the next thing in the morning. And Danny just started to get sick to his stomach. He thought, this car's got a lot wrong with it. It's not all major stuff, but at the same time, we'd never changed a transmission before. And he was spending a lot of money, to, even though it was a good price for the car, this was still a lot of his money. And he had to make sure he was doing the right thing. So we went to the hotel room that night, and he couldn't sleep. He had a hard time deciding if this was the right thing to do, and he eventually said, "Hey, I need you to call him, tell him you're me, tell him I'm not going to buy the car, and that tell him we've already left town, because I don't want him to know that we're still in town. Just tell him we're gone, we decided against it." And so I tried to talk him out of it and said, "No, it's cool. It's still a Mach 1. It's still less than you paid for the GT. It's a really cool car. Why don't you just get it?" And he just said, "No, I don't think I can do this. This is just too much for me." And so I made the phone call, and we told him that we were gone. And the next morning we woke up and we went to the Walmart in Elko and bought some donuts and started headed towards Salt Lake City. And there were a couple Mach 1s for sale in Salt Lake City, but they were full price. They were $13,000, $14,000. I remember one of them had no exhaust on it because it must have been a auction car, and when somebody had got it repossessed, they took the exhaust off it or something. And the salesman's like, "Oh yeah, you just got to find an exhaust for it, no big deal." But he still wanted top dollar. And back then we didn't have iPhones. We didn't have a way to get on the internet and look, and there wasn't really much on Craigslist or anything at the time anyway for these cars. And so we had my little brother look things up on the internet. He was at home and he had a computer, and we'd make phone calls to him, and he'd say, "Yeah, it looks like there's one at a dealership in South Salt Lake." So we type in the coordinates, and we tried finding it on this really primitive kind of iPhone. I guess we were using like an iTouch where we could go get Wi-Fi at a McDonald's or something and use it, and then try to figure out the coordinates or the address. And we were driving all over trying to find another Mach 1, and there just wasn't any. So we came home, and after a couple of days, Danny started talking to Bo and saying, "I'm real sorry." And Bo said, "Look, I really want you to have this car. You seem like a really good guy. You sound like you really love the car. You're going to take care of it." It's like, I guess the hood could be repainted, and there's some things with it. So why don't you go ahead and give me just a little less? And so they agreed on a price. And this time Danny went back with his wife, and they made a little trip out of it. And so they took some money and some supplies, just in case, and they made their way back up to Elko, and here it was again in the parking lot at the bank next to Bo's F-250. And here's a really cool picture of Bo saying goodbye to his car. He still loved the car. He was a really cool guy. I think he was just more interested in putting the money into the truck, and he had other things to take care of. But anyway, so here he is in front of the bank with the Mach 1 saying goodbye. And now this car belonged to Danny Johnson. And Danny had a wonderful time driving it home. He said it purred the whole way home, even though he had to find the synchros and everything and get it to shift into the right gears. Here's the little hotel they stayed in, and I remember he said he looked out the window several times at night to make sure the car was still there. Kind of nervous to have the title in hand, but here's the interior. You can see it's still in really good shape. So he started cleaning it up. He cleaned up the inside and wiped it all down, and man, look at that engine bay. It was pretty dirty for, a decently low mileage car that had been owned up to 60,000 miles by a doctor, and, the nice car in town. Bo drove it, and he probably had it off-road a little bit here. I know he had a scuff on the back bumper. He said it's because he saw an elk on the side of the road, so he pulled over to see it and backed up and hit one of those mile markers and stuff. But anyway, here's a after shot. Now this is what the engine looks like now, all cleaned up. And you know, Danny takes a lot of pride in his cars, and so do I. And anyway, beautiful car, beautiful engine bay. Here's a picture here where he had taken it to the local body shop, had the hood taken off so they could repaint it. I remember him telling me that the body shop could not get the hood stripe off no matter how hard they tried. They couldn't get it off with heat gun, they couldn't get it off with solvents. They had to sand it off. It was just on there, probably from baking in the sun a little bit too much and stuff. But anyway, once he got the hood repainted, I mean, it was an amazing looking car. Yeah, that's all it really needed. Here he is at his first car show with the hood stripe still off, which comes to the next point. He decided to put the hood stripe on. And he went through 3 of these stripes trying to get it right. He would get them almost all the way down and then they'd wrinkle. And, you know, it was practice. It was practice makes perfect. He was just telling this story to our friend with the white Mach 1 who's about to put the hood stripe back on his white Mach 1. And it's real funny to hear him tell a story because he gets so animated and he's talking about how hard it was and how he'd get it almost all the way on and then it would wrinkle at the end or pull the outer stripe off. But here's a beautiful picture of the car in front of a garage unit that belonged to my apartment complex where I was living at the time, and I had the ability to rent a garage there. So he paid me the money, and we kept his car there. And I had my Mach 1, but I kept it up at the airport in our parents' hangar. But this picture was actually taken of the night that we went to go get my Bullet in Vegas. We pulled his Mach 1 out of the garage and we went down to Vegas to pick up my Bullet. But anyway, you can see how much care he took of the car, and he paid for a garage for it and everything. So he got the car home and cleaned it all up real nice. And shortly after, I found my azure blue Mach 1 and bought it out of Boulder City in Nevada near Las Vegas. So we had the 2 cars together. And here's a couple pictures of the cars cruising around. But before we did any of that cruising around, we had to address his transmission. So here's the car in the hangar. And we were starting to work on the transmission issue, but also we wanted to get rid of those hard water spots. He had tried vinegar, he had tried all sorts of things, but they wouldn't go away. And we honestly thought we were going to have to repaint the car. But one of our friends suggested to try an acid called Splash. And you use it really quickly, but it works really well. You gotta rub it on and then you gotta get it off with water quickly. If you leave it on the car too long, it'll eat through the clear coat. And the rags that you use when you use this acid deteriorate after you leave them out for a day or two. The acid just eats them up. So anyway, with fresh acid bath, the car looked immaculate. The paint was wonderful. It was an amazing thing for us to be able to get the paint looking so good again. So now we had the 2 cars together. So now came the time to address the transmission. We had the car jacked up, and we had never done this before. It was a little nerve-wracking tearing this deep into a car before. We had done the intake manifold on the GT, but we had never pulled the transmission off before. And reading through the forums, we tried to figure out where to start, and there were a lot of things that got in the way. We know now that the 3rd starter bolt is almost impossible to get to, and you know, a lot of stuff took longer than usual to get going on this project. But he bought a brand new, it was a freshly rebuilt transmission, TR3650, that was for a Mach 1, and he was able to have it delivered to the hangar, you know, on a freight because it was a business location. So we got underneath the car with some friends and we started taking things apart. And it was, you know, a really new experience getting the X pipe off and getting the, you know, the drive shaft off and everything disconnected and wrestling that transmission around. You can see the spec clutch in there. And but anyway, it was a good time. We tried lowering it with boards and things, you know. We did all sorts of stuff, and later I would end up doing this several times with friends over the years, and we found it just so much easier just to put the transmission on your chest and bench press it up there with some friends help stabilizing it. And but anyway, we got it off and we got the new one on, and we made mistakes like filling the transmission with fluid first before we lifted it up, thinking that it would be easier than filling it once it was in the car, and we'd get transmission fluid spilling out of the tail shaft as we lifted it up, and and we'd be slipping around in it and laying underneath the car, and it was fun, but it was a lot of hassle. But anyway, after some time had gone by, we were able to finally get that transmission back in there and get everything hooked up right. And I had my Mach 1 there, which was in perfect running shape, and drive it around and come visit and stuff. But he got the car running. He got a really nice JLT cold air intake for it, did a couple of other things with it, and we started taking it to car shows, and we started enjoying driving them together. He'd drive it to work, and I daily drove my Bullet, and this is a time here where my heater core burst and I had to bypass it, and I had to work in the parking lot on the car, and it was nice to have him around, and he let me borrow his Mach 1 and drive over to AutoZone and get some heater hose and some things that I needed. And that's my buddy Chris's 2013 Coyote 5.0 right there. He happened to be there that day, and he thought I was my brother, and it's funny. He's like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, I'm not who you think I am." Anyway, but I took the Mach 1 and I went and got some parts for it and everything. And it was nice to be able to drive it. I always enjoyed driving it every chance that I'd get. And every car's special. And here we are at work again, a car back repaired. And at this point, I was doing a lot of drag racing with the Bullet, just getting into it. So we went to the racetrack, and here's him at the track against a 2012 V6 that had everything done to it: gears, exhaust, full bolt-ons. And they kept getting lined up, time after time after time. And Danny ended up beating him really good the next round. And this was his best run of the night against my other buddy's Mach 1, which we'll have a story about soon. And he ended up running a 13.7, which is really good for Vegas. Vegas is known to have a slower track because it's not at sea level, with a density altitude of 5,000 feet on a hot 90-degree night. But on this run, something went wrong, and it happened to be the ABS reluctor wheel on the axle came loose. It was shook loose because it wasn't pressed on right. He had aftermarket axles in there that Bo had put in on one side only, and Danny thought that the whole rear end was ruined because it was vibrating and making noise, so he decided to rebuild the whole thing. We had documented and taken really good pictures of building the rear end in my Bullet when I went to 373s, and Danny had taken all of that and studied it, and he even went a step further and got the micrometer and the inch-pound dial indicator and everything, the inch-pound torque wrench, and he got everything that he needed to do it right, and he made a video series, and this is one of his first YouTube videos that he made. He did everything right, precision, he got axles and Ford Racing 410s, everything, 31 spline, carrier, everything. So he did a great job making that. So then it was just off to enjoy the cars and go around a little bit with some friends. There was a guy we knew that used to have a Fox body with 410s and a cam and all that stuff, and it was a pretty quick car, but he decided to get a DSM that was fully built, had everything done to it, big turbo, and he had, this list of mods, and he kept bugging Danny and saying, "Hey, come race me, come race me." Danny never wanted to race, but he finally got him to go out and do it, so we went out here, lined up. You can see how ticked he is in this video getting ready, and here's the outcome. really fun that Danny had gotten the first Mach 1 out of us, and I had got my blue one after, and here's my red one that I ended up getting, and my cousin got a red one as well. So we had 3 torch red Mach 1s between the 3 of us, and this is all of us standing next to him excited, and you can see what this has all turned into. And getting my red Mach 1 was really fun because it reminds me a lot of Danny's, and you know, I moved up to a place that reminds me a lot of Elko, you know, where he got his Mach 1. So here we all are out on the town enjoying a nice day at the ice cream place and just meeting up together to go on road trips. This is us driving the 2 red Mach 1s down to the big car show that's at the casinos nearby. It's always fun to drive around in these cars. It's always fun to follow Danny's Mach 1 and hear how loud it is. And mine's equally as loud, but it's real fun to get them together and to enjoy owning Mach 1s together. So thanks for watching this video. I'm really excited to share this one. I've been really wanting to make this one for a while. It's put a lot of work into it. It's by far the longest one I've made. And I have more of these videos to come, so please subscribe to the channel and you'll see videos of my own cars coming up too that I still haven't even made. But thanks for supporting my channel. Please give the video a thumbs up, and thanks for watching.